Would every Rotarian, excuse me, I'm not going to limit to Rotarians, would every veteran please stand?
I'm not volunteering.
Thank you for what you've done for our country. Mr. Rotarian, Ken, what do you think? Uh-oh.
Ken Crawl or Ken Scott?
Ken Crawl.
Thank you.
Wow. Very good.
Phil, I think you need to go visit the boy.
Doesn't go like Ken Scott.
Other way.
Not that Ken.
Other Ken.
This Ken. John, what do you think? Uh-oh.
I give up. I don't know.
You give up a buck also.
I'm sorry for this.
That's all right.
One last one. Let's see. I've done that table. I've done. Oh, Ken Scott. Do you want to have a try at this?
Come on, Ken.
Joe Mulcairn, have you got a moment for us on the Rotary, on the topic of Rotary?
Yes, and I'll be real quick because I know we have a good program coming up here. Number one thing, last week I had occasion to do an educated moment and I talked about 1995-96. I'm not going to do it again, but I brought in the picture board there. Those pictures are 20 years old. So it's a little bit of history. And today I'm going to talk about something, I've got so much here that I hope I don't fumble my presentation, but oh, please, we're going to pick it up there. Mark, you should, damn, Mark, you ought to be looking at this joke.
Just throw it at him.
I'm so disappointed Winfred is not here. Compliments in Miami. I'm going to talk about the Donor Advice Fund, which is our club's endowment. Now, we think of three categories when we talk about money here. One is the operating fund. That's what your treasurer takes care of and pays the breakfast bills, that type of thing. And Chan initiated a couple of years ago our own 501(c) foundation thing. But in addition to that, we have what's called a Donor Advice Fund. We started that back in the idea of, actually Fred Johnson was the first one who had the idea. He recommended we have some kind of endowment in the club. A lot of clubs have it, including Rotary Club of Norfolk, as an endowment fund. Jim Jones, and correct me if I got the years wrong, but 2003 he had to submit a project that would be culminated in 2005, which is 100th anniversary of Rotary. And then in 2005 we were able to start on the chest of the Donor Advice Fund. At that time the kitty had to have in it $20,000 to start. And it became an endowment fund. The whole idea behind that thing was that we would never spend the principal, we'd just spend the earnings. And so ultimately we would, and it was a backup if some of our fundraisers weren't successful. So today, or at least as of last week, that $20,000 has grown to $104,000. And I have an educated moment here, and just pass around these, and I won't go through this whole thing. But that tells you the history of it and where we are today. That's it.
Thank you, Joe brings up giving, and this I intended to do earlier, and I got left holding the bag. But this club has been very generous in sending me off to many hotels for all kinds of things, and I have collected some stuff to give to Denise Black, who collects these things. Just rotarized the hotel room. Put everything you can find in the bags legally.
That's my legal one. Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
But seriously, those make cleanliness possible in some places where cleanliness is impossible. Give to this. Tom Williams, you're up.
Good morning. Good morning. I'd like to ask Shan and his guest Scotty to please step forward front and center for a special presentation. Recognition of a Paul Harris Fellow is the Rotary
Let's have somebody
Foundation's
block the
way
camera there for just a moment. There we go. Okay.
of expressing appreciation for a substantial contribution to the humanitarian and educational programs of Rotary. The fellowship is named for our founder, Paul Harris, a Chicago lawyer who started Rotary International with 3 business associates in 1905. Rotarians often designate a Paul Harris Fellow to honor a person whose life demonstrates a shared purpose with the objectives of Rotary. Today, we have the distinct pleasure of recognizing Mr. Sterling R. Scott as he becomes a Paul Harris Fellow. He was designated to receive this recognition as a special expression of appreciation from Mr. Chan Zucker on behalf of his fellow members of the Rotary Club of Hampton Roads. Because of gifts like the one made in Scotty's honor, the Rotary Foundation is able to carry out an array of beneficial worldwide programs aimed at improved living conditions, increased food production, better education, treatment of the sick, international understanding, and brighter hopes for peace. It gives our club great pleasure, Scotty, to present to you the 3 emblems of appreciation given to a Paul Harris Fellow: a medallion, a pin, and a certificate. Chan, would you please present Scotty with his Paul Harris Fellow medallion?
I will do so if I can find it.
Hey, Chan, while you're looking for that, Scotty goes back to when we first moved to the Holiday Inn in 1983. He set up the room for us and had been doing that for over 30 years. Nice to have you on this side of the table.
Beautifully put, Pete. So when you and Ken Scott and Chester moved over from Adam's Restaurant at the Ramada here, there was Scotty. He'd already been on the job a year.
Well, young guy.
He's celebrating his 33rd year. Talk about loyalty up. Scotty, great pleasure. Present you your Paul Harris Fellow medallion. There you go. Scotty said people wouldn't recognize him with his hat off. However, for the next minute or so here, while Mary snaps some photos, you want to take your hat off and let our guest, let Chester over here, let Chester hold your hat. He doesn't want to let go.
He doesn't want to give it up. There we
Hold
go.
on.
Very nice, very nice. Thank you.
Stay right there, Scott. We're not done.
I'd like to ask Mr. Dick Gresham to please join us. Thank you. Dick goes back further with Scotty than almost all of us present today, when all of a sudden the club needed another table to accommodate an unexpected large number of attendees. Scotty was the one who dashed out of the room, and so did Dick, to supervise the evolution as Scotty brought in tables and chairs as needed. Dick is going to present the Paul Harris Fellow pin to Scotty.
Okay. Let me just say that, and there are only 2 or 3 of you all who remember this, but when I joined Rotary in '83, the Sergeant Arms the year after that was Ken Ponton, who was a great guy, but he was my mentor at the Sergeant at Arms table. And when he moved on, I became sort of the senior Sergeant at Arms. And I've enjoyed that far more than being past president. We get to meet guys like this and enjoy being sort of involved in the background. So Scotty, it's my pleasure to stick you with this.
And let me mention, just let me interject, we have some folks standing in the back of the room here. Scotty's real bosses over there. Mary Louise Collins, the general manager of the Holiday Inn, and 2 of her staffers. Thank you for coming.
And now, fellow Hampton Roads Rotarians, we're privileged to have with us today the District 7600 Rotary Foundation Operations Chair, Ms. Clanice Platt. And she's going to make the final presentation to Scotty, the Paul Harris Fellow Certificate. Ms. Platt, will you join us?
Scotty, it gives me great pleasure, I'm going to come over to this side, to present to you this award. With you becoming a Paul Harris Fellow, you are becoming a part of a fraternity of over 1 million people in the world who are committed to making tangible and significant assistance given for furtherance of better understanding and friendly relations among the peoples of the world. Congratulations to you.
There we go.
Mary's, we want to take a lot of pictures.
Yeah, such a professional photographer.
Scotty, please accept our congratulations and sincere thanks for your commitment to our shared goals of world understanding and peace, and for setting up the club's meeting room for 32+ years. Fellow Rotarians, please rise and give Mr. Sterling R. Scott a rousing round.
I'd like to, Mary Louise, would you, Elizabeth, excuse me, and you two come up here. I'd like to get a picture with you and your staffers as well. Come on up, ladies.
Please be seated.
Just don't tell them where the picture was taken.
This concludes our ceremony. Thank you.
Well deserved. Scotty?
Congratulations and thanks so much for all you did for us and all you do for so many people.
George, would you introduce our speaker, please?
I certainly will. Our speaker this morning is Chris Rodovitz, and he is the project engineer for the Lesner Bridge Replacement Project. So, glad to have you.
Well, thank you all for inviting me here today to talk about a great project that we're building here in the city of Virginia Beach. Just give me a minute, I just want to get my pointer set up here on this laptop. Make sure we get this thing working. All right, we have to go back here. Let's see. I forgot to plug this thing in just before I started, so now I gotta kind of restart this thing. Hey Dave, when you reach in my bag and grab the mouse out of there, my fingers are too fat to hit these little icons. Well, but all I have to do is just restart PowerPoint and I'll be able to use this. While Dave gets that, a little bit about the Lesner Bridge. We started this bridge, we actually started design, I'll show you a few slides, back in 2006. So to create a project like this, it takes approximately 8 years to begin design, permit it, before you can actually have a shovel-ready project. It's a great project. It's the first segmental box girder bridge we have in the city of Virginia Beach. A similar type of bridge is the bridge over in Portsmouth, the Jordan Bridge. We have a lot of interest from across the country and through VDOT and the Federal Highways Administration in this bridge. One, because they're funding a large part of it, but two, because the technology in building these bridges is always advancing. They're always improving means, methods of building a very durable and strong bridge. So in fact, the design life of this bridge is a 100-year design life. So there's a lot of neat things on this bridge. I think it's kind of interesting too that the existing bridges that were built in 1958, the eastbound bridge, in 1967, the westbound bridge were built by McLean Contracting Company. Well, the new bridges today are built by the same company. Wow. So I think it's kind of interesting that the same company had won the contract of bridges they built decades ago. And it's kind of interesting working with McLean because they actually have file photos in their records of the original bridges being built. Wow. So and I've actually put a few up here. So it's really kind of neat to see how things have evolved in that part of Virginia Beach, and see how I'm able to see some of the old bridge come out and see from the file photos how it was getting put in at that time. Plus, I also see how health and safety stuff has changed too. Like there was no OSHA apparently back in the 1950s because of the guys hanging from the crane hook to get a lift up onto the pier caps. That somebody would go to jail, in this day and age on that. But it is a great project. As soon as we get
Did you pull the other one out for the thumb?
all you have to do is just restart a PowerPoint, shut down PowerPoint, and restart PowerPoint.
Okay, sorry. Is the file?
No, it's just on the desktop.
Yeah. Okay. It's not coming up there though.
Okay, so
You get the thing.
you see.
Can you scroll through?
Oh,
Can you
what
scroll
happened?
through? That's what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
kind of acting up.
Huh. There we go.
There you go.
All right, so let's see if this works out. All right, thank you, Dave.
It's pushing my button. You guys engineers, right?
Technology, you gotta love it. When it works, it's great. When it doesn't, well. All right, first question everybody wants to ask is the funding of the project. I know, Dave, it's really, we have $116.5 million. It's actually $119.5 million. We have about $3 million extra contingency in this project. Of that total project cost, $11.5 million was design, $10.4 million was right-of-way, utilities, and $94.6 million is the construction on this project. The VDOT contribution to the overall project cost is $84.9 million, and the FHWA contribution is $11.7 million. Schedule, I wanted to add a little bit in here. Again, I was mentioning briefly, this began in 2006. The concept to actually put out the RFP to begin the design of this project. Design and permitting were completed in July 2013. So it's about 7 years of going through design, vetting the design with the community, going through the permitting process, negotiating different aspects of the design, and finally putting it all together and getting it ready for bid. We advertised the project in September of 2013. We awarded it last April, actually in April 2014, and we issued a notice to proceed on June 2nd of last year. The project is slated to be completed in June of 2017. Now, I put this slide up here because I told you it takes about 8 years. If you start down here, and you're to follow all the stuff, and Dave, I looked at this. Dave Jarman's here, he's my supervisor here today. We're actually going to the bridge this morning, so I figured we'll do this meeting and get off to the bridge. But if you go through this whole process, it's actually true, which amazes me. I mean, every one of these items, there's actually something you have to do when you deal and design with a project that has federal dollars on it or state dollars. And it basically says when you get over here, in about 8 years, you're shovel ready, which is, we're right on target for that. So it's a very complex process. And when you hear government money has strings, well, these are all the strings that they talk about. Here's some of these file photos that a couple of them I got from the contractor. The existing bridges are 1,530 feet long. The eastbound was built in 1958. The westbound is 1967. Both bridges have 28 spans. There are 25 concrete spans. There are 3 steel spans, which basically make up the 3 center spans of the bridges. And they currently have 4-foot wide sidewalks. What you're looking at here is actually the eastbound, the eastbound bridge. This is where the westbound bridge is today. It used to be a drawbridge right over here.
Wow.
These piles right here were pulled out when they were building the eastbound bridge because there'd be a railroad trestle right here. I don't know if any of you have seen some old railroad trestle, the old trains. Well, that's where it used to be, is right here. And these piles were pulled out when they were building the eastbound bridge. Remember I mentioned OSHA? So here's the guy getting right up to the top. That would not be allowed today on our project. In fact, another interesting thing, these 2 cranes right here, they were steam powered in the 1950s. These 2 cranes are actually on the project site right now. They've been converted to diesel. So not only did the same contractor win the project, he's actually using some of the same equipment out there.
That guy fishing not wearing a hard hat.
Yeah, that's another thing. That wouldn't be allowed today either. Now, a little bit of a comparison. The new bridge, they're a little bit longer, 1,575 feet. There's 10 spans, 9 concrete piers, there's no steel span, so we've got a lot more open area between between the spans of the bridge, about 3 times as much open area. We've got 10-foot wide multi-use paths, so instead of a 4-foot sidewalk, we have a 10-foot wide multi-use path. We say multi-use because we're allowing bicyclists to use that path. So again, here you see the typical span is 150 feet. The main span over the channel is 225 feet. Right now it's about 90 feet. So significantly more room. Basically go through the presentation from the bottom up. So we're going to start with the foundations of this bridge. All the foundations on this bridge are drilled shafts. They're 4-foot diameter. We're using corrosion resistant rebar. It's not quite stainless steel, but it's certainly not plain carbon steel. It's also got a tensile strength of 100,000 pounds instead of 60,000 pounds. So it's very strong steel, very durable steel. We're using self-consolidating concrete because these shafts are 59 per bridge. They're about 107 feet deep on average. So you can't consolidate concrete very well at that depth, so we're using self-consolidated concrete. It's just a rebar. And actually, this was the foundation over by 3556 on the bay. And this is a footing being prepared to be poured over these foundations. Okay, the pier supports. The footing I mentioned is about 8 feet thick. It's mass concrete. There's 9 piers per bridge, and the pier heights typically range between 20 and 40 feet. And all the piers have a recess in here. And in that recess, there's all going to be LED lighting. So as you look at the bridge at night, the light's going to be shining up from underneath the bridge. You'll see that later. We're also going to have what we call necklace lighting on the edge of the bridge. So if you see the bridge from out at sea, you'll see the whole bridge outlined in necklace lighting. Along the pedestrian paths, you'll have LED lights shining down on the path from the parapet walls. And of course, we have street lighting for the cars in the center of the bridge. This is one of the piers, the reinforcing steel before it was stood up. You can see some of these bars are actually stainless steel bars. So we're using corrosion-resistant rebar, and we're actually using stainless steel rebar on this bridge. And this is the completed column. Okay, typical roadway. When we're all finished, we have 2 lanes per bridge. We're going to have a 14-foot wide outside lane. Right now, those lanes are about 11 feet wide on that bridge. So you got
emergency or whatever.
Well, yes, it's actually for cyclists who want to ride on the road, but we also have an 8-foot wide outside shoulder. We have a 12-foot wide inside lane, and we have a 6-foot wide inside shoulder. So we have plenty of room on that bridge. We have for cyclists, God forbid there's an accident, you got room to move the vehicles off to the side and keep traffic flowing on that bridge.
So what's the total width of your speed?
That's 53 feet 8 inches. So this is actually from outside edge to outside edge, 53 feet 8 inches. And what I was mentioning before about the necklace lighting, that necklace lighting is down here. This is the parapet wall. This is the barrier wall. So we actually have lights recessed in these walls for the pedestrian path. And the street lighting will actually be on the inside of the bridge. Yeah, it's hard to see. It's 53 feet 8 inches from outside to outside edge. All of our utilities are inside the bridge. In the westbound bridge, we have the water line, and we have some spare conduits for Dominion Power, and of course communication lines and bridge lighting. The eastbound bridge, we have fewer utilities, but we do have some spare conduits for communications and bridge lighting. And I know a lot of people ask, what's this distance? And that distance is approximately 8 feet. Right now, we're in stage 2 of construction. People ask how we're going to maintain 4 lanes of traffic. This is how we're going to do it. We're going to build a westbound bridge first. Once we're completed with the westbound bridge, we're going to move all 4 lanes of traffic to that westbound bridge. And then we're going to demo the 2 existing bridges. So the new bridge is wide enough to hold 4 lanes of traffic, plus enable us to put a temporary 4-foot wide pedestrian path. So we still allow pedestrian and cyclists to get through on a temporary path. Once we move all that traffic there, we build the new eastbound bridge, and we move the 2 eastbound lanes back to where they're supposed to be. And then we actually return back to the westbound bridge and build out our 10-foot wide multi-use path. And that will complete the project. So I just want to talk about some of these segment details. This is actually a cut from one of the plan sheets. The reinforcing steel and the pre-stressing and the ducts going into each one of these segments at the casting yard is so complicated that you actually had to do color 3-dimensional drawings to give to the guys to understand which bar goes where. Because looking at 2D plan sheets, you would go blind. I mean, all the lines seem to go together. So we provided these 3D drawings for the guys erecting these cages to make sure all the right bars go in all the right places. The typical segments are about 10 feet wide by 54 feet long, about 150,000 pounds each, or 75 tons, and there are 168 of these segments per bridge. This is actually, all the segments are being cast at Atlantic MetroCast in Portsmouth. That's one of the beauties about this type of bridge. So as we're out at the construction site, building the foundations, building the substructure for the bridge, the superstructure for the bridge is being constructed at the same time, but it's being constructed off-site. And right now, at this stage of the project, both things are coming together. The segments are arriving to the site, and we're moving ahead with the superstructure. I don't know how many of you have seen the construction sequence animation. I know some of you probably have seen it. I've got a link to it here, which I'll show you later, but it shows you how this will start coming together really fast. A little bit about the casting yard here. This formwork, this is what we call a bed, and we actually have 2 beds for this project. It was custom made for the Lesner Bridge project in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. They made it up in Pittsburgh, they shipped it down to Atlantic MetroCast in Portsmouth, and that is the formwork that we're using to build all these segments. There's a lot of quality assurance, quality control on each and every one of these segments. We're actually surveying these segments down to the accuracy of 4 decimal points. So you would think heavy, big construction, you would have a tolerance much greater than 4 decimal points, but we're testing for warp, we're testing for twist on these segments. Everyone's got to be perfect because they've got to line up out in the field. I mean, if you're off by a little bit on one segment, you're going to be off a lot 1,500 feet down the road. In this particular picture, you see a survey station. We actually use 3 different survey stations at the casting yard. We have 3 different surveyors surveying that each and every segment. There's 6 pins on the top of each one of these segments that they survey and verify their data before they cast the concrete. They make every fine adjustment that they need to at the formwork, and they do all the surveying before the sun rises because, believe it or not, at 4 decimal points, the heat of the sun will actually throw off the survey. So I just want to talk a little bit about that because I actually took for granted, this is a big concrete, big construction. I had no idea until I started working on this project that they had to get to that level of accuracy. This is what we call a jig. We have the rod busters out there tying all the steel rebar, most of the steel rebar in a jig, which then they pick up by a crane. This steel frame you see up top here is just a support that the crane hooks onto, and they pick up this whole rebar cage and they set it inside the formwork. Then they finish up whatever they have to finish up and then pour the concrete. The concrete out on this project too, at the casting yard, is a design mix between 6,000 and 8,000 pounds, but we're actually getting compression tests of about 12,000 psi. Your sidewalk is typically 4,000 pounds. It's very strong concrete, we've also specified a low permeable concrete. So between the corrosion-resistant rebar, the stainless steel rebar, and the low permeability of the concrete, we're going to have very little saltwater intrusion into the rebar over the years to attack that rebar from the inside out. So
Chris,
really,
who's the concrete company?
it's actually AMI. They have their own batch plant on site. And we actually have our own inspectors out there making sure that the batches that they're mixing meets all the quality standards. So they're mixing all their batches around, literally right next to where those forms are.
How do you determine the quality of the concrete that you use?
Well, they're checking for air entrainment, they're checking for slump, which is how much the concrete settles. We're also collecting test cylinders. So when they place the concrete, they say they got a 6,000 pound mix. We collect test cylinders and we do a 7-day break, 14 and 28-day break.
That was my question. And what is the weight? What's the most weight that load can have?
The most weight?
Yeah, you have to consider, don't you? You know, semis going over that bridge.
Oh, you mean on the bridge itself?
Yeah.
Well, believe it or not, this bridge was actually designed for the construction loading of that big yellow and blue gantry that you see out there. It's over 1.1 million pounds, and you can imagine,
wow,
it's on 2 feet that are 18 inches in diameter. So if you figure out the square footage of those two 18-inch diameter feet, and then you divide 1.1 million pounds, you figure that point load is tremendous. So the bridge was actually designed for that. So the service loads for cars, trucks, nothing compared to the construction loads that the bridge was actually designed for.
Well, how about your intense cold and intense heat? How do you go out there?
Well, there's heating and contraction of the bridge, so we do have expansion joints on each side of the bridge. So we have the bearings on the bridge. We have different types of bearings to allow for movement.
And it does, I guess it does give and take over time.
It will. I mean, you don't want those small stresses, those small loads will end up, if you don't address them in the design.
How about a hurricane, like a Category 4 hurricane?
You know, it's funny, is that the wind loading, AASHTO dictates how the wind loading is handled on that bridge, and they actually do it through, it's a lot more complex than I thought it was. When I started looking into it, they actually assume, okay, wind hits it at a 90-degree angle at the side of the bridge. Okay, then hit it at a 30-degree angle, hit it at a 45-degree angle. And they analyze that in the design for different wind loads to make sure the bridge isn't going to fail. So there's a lot of analysis that goes, and even look at how are we going to change the hydraulics in the channel. We're taking out the old bridge that's of a certain design. Now we're putting a new bridge with large footers. How is the hydraulics in that channel going to change? How is the scour going to change? That determines how deep our foundation's got to be.
And what is the lifetime? What do you project the lifetime of this bridge?
100 years. Yep.
We won't be there.
100-year design. The casting yard is actually kind of neat. You got to have these segments fit together perfectly out in the field. So we're using a match cast technique. So what that means is here in the formwork, you're actually casting the new segment right against the segment that has been previously cast. And what they do is they put a bond breaker on the whole face of this segment that they're match casting against, and that bond breaker is really talcum powder and soap. So they cast the concrete right up against it, then they move this out of the match cast position.